correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPG, the podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience. Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to Me and Steve Talk RPGs. I'm here tonight with my friend Steve.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, how's it going?
That's a loaded question, but...
I heard you were in the dark much of the weekend, but anyway.
Yeah.
Literally instead of figuratively this time, though.
Yeah, I'm usually in the dark about things, but yeah, this weekend it was fun. We didn't have power from Thursday night till Saturday evening, like almost same time Saturday night. So,
jeez.
Yeah.
That's
fun.
That's
2
never
days
fun.
without power. But anyways, we're back online. We're back going. We're going to get our podcast recorded for the week. But before we do that, we need to shout out a podcast for the week.
Oh, who are we shouting out this week, Steve?
I think it's going to be the wonderful folks over at Squad Tactica.
Sugi.
Yep.
Our buddy Sugi. So what's Squad Tactica about, Steve?
Squad Tactica is a Warhammer 40K kill team podcast focused on the kill teams and narratives they forge. They talk about kill team rules, fluff, squad building, customization, personal narrative, and battle reps. It's a show all about kill team and the exciting things that they get to experience as they explore the game or what the game has to offer. Yeah, very cool folks over at Squad Tactica.
Mm-hmm.
I get a lot of my painting advice from the folks over at Squad Tactica.
Yeah. His Discord is really cool. If you're into mini painting, there's a lot of really talented people over there.
Yeah, if you're into minis in general, his Discord's really good.
Mm-hmm.
But with that, we reached out to our Discord this week to get us a topic.
Mm-hmm.
And Dan suggested that we talk about weird genre mixing RPGs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're in our Discord and you're going, man, they picked the first one that was listed there. No, we didn't. We rolled a die and we crit failed. So don't come at me with that. We saw you, but, you know, we picked one at random and random said the first one. So,
yep.
Speaking of which, you get to hang out in our Discord occasionally. When I can't think of a topic idea for the week, I will just throw up in the Discord an exploding message that asks for topic ideas for the podcast.
Mm-hmm. This is not the first time.
No, this is not the first time, and I can guarantee it will not be the last. So if you come join our Discord, Me and Steve Talk RPGs, you can get to participate in that. You also get to participate in all the fun conversations that happen on our Discord.
Get to hear me randomly find things on Kickstarter like Orkborg.
Yeah, Orkborg. Or, you can talk to former guests. Miguel hangs out on our podcast or on our Discord occasionally. And I mean, Justin Eacock was just in there suggesting topics for the night's episode.
Mm-hmm. Brett Bowen.
Yeah, Brett's a regular on our Discord. There's a lot of people. If you want to come hang out, come hang out.
Mm-hmm. And we'll talk and argue about just about anything gaming related.
Yeah, and occasionally, when I have the energy and the time to, I'll go on and sit in general chat and even just talk to our audience.
Yeah.
So you can come argue with me about anything gamer related.
That's true. But
genre bending RPGs.
I mean,
well,
I don't even know.
Let's start with defining genre bending, because I know you're going to say I don't even know where to start.
Well, kind of. I mean, like, because is that things that, like, okay, Shadowrun. You know, for the longest time, I heard Shadowrun described as cyberpunk with magic.
Yeah, I think it's kind of that. I think of, like, when I hear genre bending, the first thing that comes to mind is Rifts.
Well, see, to me, Rifts is I forever will joke about it as the kitchen sink RPG. And I think to a certain point that may be where Shadowrun was never a game I was that keen to check out, because Rifts was a game that I discovered early on, was really the first setting that I went like, oh, wow. And Rifts is a little bit of everything. I jokingly refer to it as a kitchen sink system, because if you dig hard enough, there might be rules to play the kitchen sink.
Yeah, well, I mean, But then there's stuff that you don't really think about that's genre bending that is. I mean, we just recently, within the past couple months, had Chris Spivey on to talk about Haunted West. That's a
Mhm.
genre bending game. I mean, granted, it's kind of in a genre amongst other games of like a paranormal Wild West game, but at its core, it is a mix between, you know,
Well, he's got such a strong historical element in that game.
right. So you have a historical West game mixed with a what do you want to call it? Mixed with a very interesting.
It's Weird West, but
Yes, that's it.
not like Wild Wild West, Weird West, but it includes that.
Right. So you have stuff like that, or then there's stuff just like
See, my mind immediately goes to, like, stuff like Troika, which is
Troika.
just
Yeah,
weird. Like, they just turned the weird meter all the way up. Another one, your Ultraviolet Grasslands, which, I mean,
and we talked
self-described
about
as,
that way back in the day.
psychedelic heavy metal, The Dying Earth meets Oregon Trail.
Well, I mean, Neurosity
Yeah,
and
even more so
Warplands.
Warpland, yeah.
Yeah, Hell Knight is coming out, and that's going to be a really cool genre bending game.
Yeah, in its own way.
Yeah, you're bending the genres of like I don't even know what you would really call it, like biker fiction and metal. I don't know.
Yeah, it's but then, okay, Morkborg is doom metal fantasy.
Right. I
I mean,
mean
that's what
that's
it was designed as, right?
right. Or you have, stuff that's really dark like Cult, Divinity
Mhm.
Lost. That's, reading through that's sort of like a religious cyberpunk game.
See, I never got a cyberpunk vibe from it, but it's got religious overtones, it's very dark modern occult horror.
Yeah.
But, like, I guess at what point too, everything at this point.
Everything mixes everything.
Right, and I wonder at some point, are we as a society, are we so eager to put labels on things that we just invent a genre for everything we see?
Well, I took a film class back when I was in college because I wanted to, needed an art credit. And one of the things they talked about in that film class was that genre is not like genre being not a tangible thing means that it's not an actually real thing. It's something that we ascribe things to genre. It's not a tangible item or an actual thing. So what somebody might say is somebody's definition of horror versus your definition of horror and my definition of horror can be two different things. And so that means that a movie that's in a horror genre may not be in a horror genre for me, right?
Mhm.
And it's an interesting conversation to have that's a little bit too deep, I think, for this episode. But yeah, the idea that genre is what you make it, genre is what you ascribe the media that you're consuming to. Right.
Mhm.
And so genre bending is, I mean, there's a lot of things that are genre bending. Like even in like, let's go, let's go even weirder. I would say that Eberron is genre bending for a D&D campaign.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily argue that. I don't know exactly what I define Eberron as. I mean, it intentionally kind of includes everything, but is nothing.
Right.
And that sounds like almost like a complaint, and I don't mean it that way because I think it's an amazing setting. But, like, there's room, and I think to me, that's why the setting appeals to me, is that there's room in Eberron to go and do, if you wanna go more classic high fantasy, you've got Ondair, all that. Depending on what you wanna do, you can go to different regions and get really different flavors all in the same world, so to speak, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
In that way, is Star Wars genre bending as an RPG because that universe is so big, you can tell a lot of different stories.
I think it depends on which version you're playing.
Well, I'm thinking more in the context of the setting than the mechanics, but
Well, yeah, I'm yeah. I make more making a joke about WEG Star Wars being absolutely bonkers because I recently started looking into West End Games Star Wars and it a lot of stuff in there, and a lot of it's not, I don't know, in line with canon Star Wars, if that makes any sense.
Well, not anymore. It defined some of what was canon Star Wars for a while, though.
Right. Right, it did, and I understand that, but as time's gone on, it's not been favorable.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that, haven't aged as well as some others, look at Vince Neil.
Yeah, look at Mick Jagger.
Well, um, but I mean, yeah, geez, genre bending. I mean, what I don't even that's a weird one, like, and yet I understand what it means, and I think in a lot of times that's kind of where I draw to games, is games that are kind of like an odd mix.
Mhm. I
Or
agree. I agree completely. My draw in games is usually the weird genre mixes.
and then it's like, okay, if you say post-apocalyptic, well, that can be everything from Mad Max to Riffs is technically post-apocalyptic. A lot of stuff like that. I mean, but Mutant Year Zero is post-apocalyptic. So is Twilight 2000.
Mhm.
They're very different games.
Another genre bending game, speaking of that, is oh no, it just left my mind. The world is called Mort.
More. Oh,
Uh
Slay.
Slay Industries, that's it. Yeah. That's another genre bending game.
Yeah, in a way, it's I mean, it is like a dark, gritty noir type thing, but it's got cyberpunk elements. It's and then, what do you call games like well, here's one that's kind of a weird genre mix is Mutant City Blues,
Yeah.
which is, X-Men meets, you know, oh my gosh, my brain's gone dead. Law and Order or, well,
Yeah. Any sort of noir or anything like that.
yeah, well, it's a superhero police procedural.
Yeah.
I mean, that's but then you have Jessica Jones, which the second edition of Mutant City Blues is set up with a private eye mode that I would guess, would effectively emulate like Jessica Jones if you were playing it, maybe even solo.
Mhm.
Um, so I mean, but then is superheroes genre bending just in and of itself?
I think it depends. I think it depends on the game that you're playing and the type of game that you're playing. So let me sort of elaborate on that. So like Aberrant by White Wolf, right?
Mhm.
That's a genre bending supers game, right?
Mhm.
But something like Mutants and Masterminds really isn't. It is stays sort of true to the genre of supers, right?
Yeah, it's much more a comic book supers.
Right, it's comic books and even a little bit of the movies, like, it's very much a by the books type of thing.
Mhm.
Or any official supplements like a Marvel superhero game, right?
Mhm.
But like I said, there are those supers games that are genre mix and a genre bend, and I'm very excited to see it. It looks like, and I'll just say this since we're talking about supers, it looks like 2022 is going to be a really good year for superheroes games, or this year or next year,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of people on the inside talking about, oh, I'm working on a this or I'm working on a that. So, you know,
Yeah.
very cool stuff to keep an eye out. And we will, sort of keep you updated on the
Yeah.
situation. But
Well, with what information we get, yeah.
yeah, but yeah, it's one of those things where eh,
Well
genre bending is everything. I mean, yeah.
okay, like, but I think you also have to say, what most things I think are a bend of genres in some way or shape or form. Like a game like say Feng Shui or Feng
Hmm.
Shui or however it's supposed to be pronounced. I'm not honestly sure. That's designed to emulate that Hong Kong cinema style, which is,
Right.
I guess, maybe a style more than a genre, but there's a lot of genre that you can do with that flavor.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I don't know that that's a genre in and of itself, but it kind of is. Everybody knows sort of what you're talking about when you're. Well, I wouldn't say everybody, but most people know what you're talking about when you're talking about that Hong Kong cinema style movies. If You talk about a Jackie Chan movie and people know what you're talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and so, I mean,
Dang
yeah.
you. I'm gonna have to get off here and watch some Jackie Chan movies tonight. I know what I'm doing. I'm just gonna sit down and do that because that sounds like a good time right about now.
Oh, Jackie Chan stuff is so much fun.
Well, even his like legitimate kung fu movies that he made in China are fantastic. They're so
Mhm.
good. Like, yeah. Anyways,
Yeah, I
sorry.
actually years ago, I read he had an autobiography out, like, 20 some years ago that I read. I still probably have it somewhere.
Hmm.
It was kind of interesting. But, yeah, I mean, yeah, wow. But, I mean,
Sorry,
yeah,
I
like I
didn't
said,
mean to distract you.
but, I mean, yeah, genre bending is like, I don't even know what that really is, other than I think that to a certain point, that's I mean, is that almost everything other than, like, Pendragon, which is, Arthurian legend?
Yeah, that and there's a couple that are, Pendragon. I think it's um what's I'm trying to think. There's a couple other that are sort of straight, very straight type of games.
Oh, I'm sure there are. I mean, well, like you said, in its own way, Mutants and Masterminds, probably the forthcoming Marvel game
Yeah, yeah.
are very much traditional superhero games. But like, what is Numenera? I mean, Numenera is post-apocalyptic fantasy that's so far past technology that they've reverted kind of. Like,
Yeah.
it's
I mean, that's what is Warpland though.
well, in
If
its
we're
own way,
playing
yeah.
Jeopardy, if we're playing Jeopardy and you start describing that, I ring my buzzer and go, "What is Warpland?"
Well, yeah,
No,
I didn't
sorry.
mention acid, but
Well,
and I mean, I don't mean it, like, literal sense, but it has, Warpland has a very kinda psychedelic feel to it.
it does. Like I said, if we're playing Jeopardy, I'm ringing my buzzer and going, "What is Warplands?" Nope, sorry, we're looking for Numenera.
Well, look at what
Oh,
was it Invisible Sun
yes,
that had
Invisible
the
Sun.
Salvador Dali inspired artwork and stuff?
Yeah, yeah, and that's literally bending. I don't know
Yeah,
how genre bending that is. It's just literally bending. What's it bending? Clocks, people. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, and then where do you throw in games that, like, are intentionally settingless, like Genesis or Savage Worlds or
I think that's when you have to sort of look at the you sort of look at the settings that are being provided. So like
I was just gonna say that.
Keyforge is a really I not that I have a ton of interest in it, but it's a really cool setting. Like I started looking at it a little bit and like it's got some neat stuff here. Just, you know, not my jive, but I'm not gonna say it's not like a weird genre bend
Mhm.
or, and then on the inverse, and I'll sort of I'm gonna gripe a little bit about this. Shadow of the Beanstalk is about as generic cyberpunk as you can get. And that's coming from somebody who loves the game that is literally just called Cyberpunk. I played some Shadow of the Beanstalk, and so I've been doing a lot of looking at Shadow of the Beanstalk. And that game has, well, that setting has some interesting things. And I will say that the Beanstalk is a cool concept in and of itself, but the world is too polished for my tastes. I Shadow of the Beanstalk occasionally, and as I was reading it, really feels like cyberpunk through the lens of Apple. Like if Apple was the ones to be the big huge corporations, and not the military industrial complexes like it is in or in the cyberpunk game, right?
Mhm.
I think you would end up with something like Shadow of the Beanstalk, where everything is clean and aesthetically pleasing, and there is grime, but man, you got to really dig to find it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, see, I think the tools are there to play the cyberpunk that you and I want, but the setting as they have it written, and I have the book as well, and I haven't actually read it, but I've spent a lot of time flipping through it, and it does, you're right, it feels too polished. And I don't know, some of that I'm sure is my personal taste, right? But I'm like you.
Oh yeah, I'm absolutely saying it's personal taste on that one, but yeah, I just feel like it's kind of hard coming off of Cyberpunk Red and going to Android Shadow of the Beanstalk and being like, okay, we're gonna come off of Cyberpunk Red and play a gritty Cyberpunk game when it's like I almost feel like it's a gritty Cyberpunk game through the lens of like a Saturday morning cartoon.
I wouldn't say that. I think, for lack of a better way to say it, you and I probably because of that being our kind of initial exposure, subscribe to the Ponsmithian view of cyberpunk.
Well, but I don't think it's just Pondsmith. I don't know.
No.
It's a lot of the cyberpunk media I consume. I want to be dirty and grimy. I was just complaining to you the other day. I messaged you and was like, "Man, I need a good, dirty, grimy, nasty cyberpunk TV show." And
Yeah.
there just isn't like yeah, there's stuff. I started Altered Carbon, and it's got a little bit of that, and that's fine. But no, when I subscribe, when I want to play Cyberpunk, I'm not so much in it for like the really clean side of it and like the futurism. It's more of that like almost dystopian for me.
See, you don't want to know what to me almost has a cyberpunk vibe, and it just kind of hit me just now.
Hmm.
And I've only actually watched about half of it right now, but the original animated Cowboy Bebop.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Cowboy Bebop is very um Cowboy Bebop is space western
It
and cyberpunk.
is, but it's got that vibe.
It does have the cyberpunk vibe. I think that's because of its setting. Like at its core, the stories that Cowboy Bebop tell are very, very much western stories. You know, they're bounty hunters looking for their next meal, right?
Mhm.
But all the surroundings, all the trappings are like we're on Mars or we're in space or we're on the Bebop or we're looking for some weird space drugs or you know what I mean? Like
But well,
it's all the trappings around cyberpunk, which is cool. I love Cowboy Bebop so much.
that's okay. So then, just to chase this rabbit a little further down the hole, is cyberpunk in some ways almost a futuristic western?
I think it depends on the story you're trying to tell.
Fair.
Because I argue that one of the most pivotal pieces of cyberpunk media, which is Blade Runner, is not a western. That's a film noir.
Mhm.
That's a detective film.
Yeah.
Um, other stuff like Johnny Mnemonic may be a western in a way, where you're sort of experiencing the story about a guy who's smuggling something that could kill him. Which, if you haven't watched Johnny Mnemonic recently, that movie's great.
I haven't watched it. It's been quite a while. I was just thinking the original Matrix is definitely very cyberpunk, but I wouldn't think of it as a western.
Yeah, it's not. I don't. I look. That's another. I sort of look at it as a Hong Kong action movie because that's what the first Matrix was really meant to be,
Mhm.
with a lot of social commentary. But no,
Yeah.
I think there is some media that is Western when it comes to cyberpunk, and there's some media that's not. And I think that's part of why I like cyberpunk so much as a genre because there's a lot of stuff that you can do with a cyberpunk story.
Well, but see, I think that's where your in all honesty, your genre mix comes in, right? I think it doesn't necessarily have to be in the world that's been built. It's the stories that you tell. Because like my wife and I have recently started watching the TV series Yellowstone.
Right.
And I'm not going to spoil anything for anybody, I don't think anyway. But we're a couple episodes into the second season now, and it occurred to me that this is a mob movie told through the lens of a western,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and yet it does have a modern western feel to it all the same.
Well, and then there's stuff like, I mean, to go back to Star Wars, we both love The Mandalorian, and it's no stretch to say that at its core, The Mandalorian is a Western told through the lens of Star Wars.
Oh, very much so. They didn't even really try to hide it.
Uh-uh. No. No, down to like season 2 when you start getting introduced to, oh, here's our generic Western town.
Yeah.
So that's,
Yeah. Well, but isn't there the old, and you probably remember this from, but the what is it? There's 7 basic stories that everything else is just a mix of.
yeah, I've heard that before.
And I think that's a thing that's easy to see if you look back in on something.
Right.
I don't think you start that way, but
Yeah, I think it gets a little mucky when you're trying to like the hero's journey is something that you can tell a billion different ways.
well, right. That's what I'm saying though. Like, it's like music. I mean, there's 12 notes on the Western music scale.
Mhm.
You can put them together in, you know, an infinite number of ways.
Right. Right.
So I
Um
mean,
yeah,
yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
So I mean, like, and yet I think for me, like we said early on, I think that bending of things is kind of sometimes where things get interesting, but yet sometimes I don't want that. Like part of me really like I would happily play if someone said, "Hey, do you want to play in this Shadowrun game?" and I was available, I would go do it. I'm sure I would.
Yeah. Yeah, I would even learn that system just to play that game.
At the same point, if you offer me the choice between Cyberpunk and Shadowrun, I'm probably going to pick Cyberpunk 90% of the time because in my brain, I like that genre better without the magic, I think.
Well, that's just a personal taste thing.
Yeah, right. But like where, and this is, I was trying to say this earlier, but I think part of the reason I never gravitated towards Shadowrun is because I had found Rifts, and Rifts to me felt like I could do everything in Rifts that I could do in Shadowrun, but there was stuff I could do with Rifts that I couldn't with Shadowrun.
Right. Oh yeah, I know the feeling.
I don't know if that makes, you know, but I've been thinking too. I was wondering, and I don't know the dates, but looking back on it now, I can see there was definitely some influence, probably going back and forth, maybe even between Riffs and 40K. Like if you look at the artwork for the Coalition mechs and stuff, to me that looks very reminiscent of, especially in the earlier stuff. It looks very reminiscent of a lot of like the Space Marine stuff,
Yeah.
which okay is 40K genre bending. Orcs in space.
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
it
I
is. It is at the end of the day. When was the original Rifts released? 84.
91, I think. Let me Google.
I was trying to look that up myself because 1990.
Yeah, okay.
And so not to burst your bubble, but 40K Rogue Trader came out in 87. But
Right.
they could have easily been borrowing. I mean, it's easy to, you know,
Oh,
I'm not making any statements here, but it's easy to just borrow ideas or concepts from here or there or the other place.
oh, exactly. And I don't mean that as a fault. It occurred to me, I was thinking about some of the artwork and going, now that I think about it, that's very Space Marine-esque. And
Mhm.
look, I mean, everything inspires everything. Unless you literally, grow up in a vacuum, you're seeing things, even if you're not consciously drawing inspiration from them, it happens.
Right. And yeah. But yeah, I think genre bending is an interesting I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, well, no, genre bends are interesting. And okay, here's we've talked about how much we'd like to play a game in this world that I think is a very much a genre bend is the A&E series.
Into the Badlands.
Yes, which is post-apocalyptic kung fu with I don't know what all
Western, like it's got all kinds of stuff. Everything from like
some steampunky elements to it.
steampunk to, antebellum stuff. Like it's all over the place.
But yet it doesn't. I mean, at points it feels a little hodgepodge, but it doesn't either.
It's not forcing it,
Yeah,
which I think is its big benefit. It doesn't force its hodgepodge.
yeah. Like you don't go, wait, what? Huh?
Yeah,
I mean, you do, but, like, in
in good ways, not bad.
yes. So yeah. Anyone who's looking for something to license for an RPG, there you go. Find out who owns that license and do that. Um,
Yeah, if you want to ask me and you want my opinion on what you should be working on next, I think you should be working on an Into the Badlands style game and get it over to me so I can play test it. And
but I mean, yeah.
I'll even put a quote on the back of your book. This game is good by some guy on the internet.
Okay. Well, here, tell me if is Knight's Black Agent genre bending?
Yeah, kind of.
It's action spy thriller meets vampires.
I mean, Delta Green's genre bending.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, it is a government conspiracy game mixed with Lovecraftian or cosmic horror.
Yeah,
It's like the X-Files is a genre bend. It's this basically cop drama, government procedural.
yeah. I honestly, I'm wondering, are there more games that are genre bends than aren't?
I think the answer to that is yes, because I think it's harder for me to think of games like I just thought of a game that isn't a genre bend, Deadball, which is what it's baseball,
Yeah,
um, or yeah, like Dungeons and Dragons Pathfinder at their core is just pure fantasy, but they're a weird mix of high fantasy because they're not Tolkien. You know what I mean?
yeah,
They're their own world, and I mean, maybe later editions of D&D and Pathfinder are not quite genre or are more genre bending than earlier, because I think like back to AD&D, that was pretty straightforward.
yeah,
But the more recent editions, you start getting into some of the changes that they've made to races and classes, and you start looking at some of the stuff and you're like, wow, you've changed this a lot from where it started and what the genre norm is. Good or bad. I don't really have a say in that race, but I'm just saying that, you know, it's changed and evolved a lot over the years.
yeah. D- Well, it's an interesting conversation in a lot of ways, even though we've just sort of rambled. But
Well, I mean, that's what we do. But at the same time, and I appreciate the topic because it has been an enlightening, sort of a fun topic to get onto.
yeah. But I think maybe that's why I like RPGs. You know what? That maybe part of it is because by the nature of what RPGs are, you can sandwich these two things together and imagine what it would be like.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's
That's the whole
I
point.
I know that's why I like RPGs. I know that's why I come to them because it's like, well, that and in my opinion, certain pieces of media, there's not enough representation like it of what I want. So
Mhm.
stuff like Cyberpunk, like I just said, there aren't very many good, hardcore Cyberpunk TV shows. But I could get a Cyberpunk Red game going every week, and that would satisfy that itch. You
Mhm.
know, it's that type of thing where and I know that I come for the weird genre bends because honestly, you guys have heard it. I listen to what I bring every week to Game of the Week. It's like, well, what's this weird game that I'm going to talk about this week? You know?
Mhm. Well, I think that's half of the fun. Like, I know half the time when I'm looking for game of the week, I'm going, "Okay, what can I find that Steve will be mad that I found it he didn't?" That was like Retro Star. Like,
Yeah, yeah. I am mad about RetroStar.
but I mean, yeah, it's genre is a weird thing in RPGs, and boy, it's it actually makes me think though, because what is it that you're looking for, and how do you know when you found it?
Hmm.
Like, you've got this stuff in your head, but do you know what it is? You're looking for that right flavor of cake, but you don't know what it is until you taste it. And I think, maybe that can be it can be good and bad, I guess, because I think the other thing that I'm sure you and I deal with is there's that thing out there that we're looking for, And every time we think, oh, this is going to be it, and then it's not. And it's not that what we found is bad, but we're like kind of let down that it isn't what we hoped it would be. And, you know, I don't know, do we, or at least for me myself, do I sometimes not enjoy a game as much for what it is because I want it to be something slightly different?
Yeah.
And is that a trap that we can fall into as players and GMs, that we don't enjoy the moment because we're chasing that white whale?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's exactly what it is. But, well, let's take a look here. I think we've had a very productive conversation.
Thought provoking at the very least.
And so I think with all that thought provoking, we need to move into game of the week.
Yes, game of the week.
Game of the week. Game of the week.
Give your voice a rest. I'll go first.
Okay.
I have a game called Cyberpulp Daydreams, and that is Cyberpulp Daydreams. It is pay what you want on Drive-Thru RPG. Welcome to the Convergence, aka The Verge. Before you is Iden, the titanic pillar set firmly in space at the center of our core worlds by our ever-present lords, the Trusky. But it has sort of a mix between space opera and fantasy and all of these cool things. Like I said, it's a pay what you want game. I just picked it up. Definitely something to check out. Definitely a really interesting game.
Yeah, that does look interesting.
I like their PDF, even though it's very bland. There's no real art in the PDF, but everything is well annotated.
Hmm.
And yeah, very cool stuff there. So check out Cyberpulp Daydreams.
Yeah, very neat. That does look cool. I'm in the process of downloading that right now.
Maybe a one shot to come of that soon, because it looks pretty easy to figure out and play.
All right. So I am going to go with something that I need to buy for myself, because you've heard me talk about how much, and despite the fact that I've only read about half of it because I keep getting distracted by other things, how much I think of Warlock, the lightweight kind of
Mm-hmm.
British OSR fantasy system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, the same author, Greg Saunders, has put out a sci-fi space game called Warp Star, which is kind of the same thing but sci-fi, and or at least that's the way I understand it. I haven't read it, but glancing at it, that's what it looks like. Again, not the it's not for everybody, right? He fonts are a little different, whatever. Very kind of minimalist art, but I just like reading what I have of Warlock. I'm in love with the fact that like it does everything you need it to, but doesn't have a lot of just little fiddly bits that you have to remember to account for.
Right.
And so I'm kind of expecting Warp Star to be that same way. The system he used in Warlock, he turned a D100 system, which I'm a fan of in the first place, but he managed to turn that into a very, very simple D20 rollover system, which is so easy for people to understand. Not that D100's hard, but it just, I don't know, it feels even simpler somehow.
No, I get it. That happens.
And so, like I said, this is, it's called Warp Star from Fire Ruby Designs. There's a bunch of support content out for it, and he's also very open to people putting out like third-party stuff for it. So there's a ton of, be it adventure, supplemental content, stuff like that. It's, like I said, I'm gonna have to pick it up. PDF's currently going for a little over $12, but
Yeah,
I think
very
that's
cool.
on my list of something that I need to get.
Very cool. Well, with that all being said, we have one more, well, sort of announcement. I guess you could just say it's an announcement in a way.
Mm-hmm.
We are quite a few months out from this, but Want to make sure everybody that listens to our podcast is aware. We are going to be at the Pittsburgh Gaming Expo this October. We will be hosting a panel. We will also be hosting maybe a couple games there live. So if you want to come play games with us, you can check out Pittsburgh Gaming Expo. And that is going to be October 1st and 2nd at the Monroeville Convention Center. So you can check that out on Facebook.
Yeah, I'll put a link for the website in the show notes as well.
Yeah, very excited.
No, yeah, it'll actually be like my first con thing, just because I don't know, I'm a social recluse and don't like people.
Yeah, this will be my first gaming convention, but yeah, no, very excited to go and get this, to host a panel and to play games with people in person and yeah, do some cool stuff,
Yeah, just meet more gamer people, right?
Yeah. So if you're local to the Pittsburgh area and you feel like coming out October 1st and 2nd, we'll be there both days. They have their bands listed, some pretty awesome music. Yeah, cool stuff.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, we'll be doing that come October. And
As always, links to everything are in the show notes. Discord, Patreon. Yeah, pretty much.
Twitter, Facebook.
Yeah, anything that you can think we probably have. If we don't have it, let us know and we'll talk about it. But with all that being said, we do want to thank you for listening and be kind to one another and get out there and play some RPGs.
Yep. Take care, y'all.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter and RPGs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast, on Discord at Me and Steve RPGs, and as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.
All right. So let's hit it. 3, 2. Ooh, wait. Nah, turn on the local.
Oh, yeah, I better do that too. 3, 2, wait.